So it's been just over a year since my Kakashi versus the Akatsuki video that I did with Sage and Thick Calves a while back. And I just figured it'd be a good time to revisit that topic. How I'm going to do this, despite the way I may have titled the thumbnail, is I'm not going to be doing that specific Kakashi. I won't be covering War Arc Kakashi specifically in this video. Instead, to make it a little more interesting and fair, I'm going to be covering each version of Kakashi in chronological order. In other words, I'm going to be discussing how a hypothetical 1v1 against each Akatsuki member would fare against Kakashi during the time he would have fought them. So, for example, how he would have done against Hidan and Kakuzu 1v1 in that specific arc that they fought them in. Again, just to make it more interesting and fair for each side. I'm going to be excluding part 1 Kakashi as, he is pretty impressive, all things considered, but again, all things considered, compared to his Shippuden version, he's really kind of fodder. I'm just going to be using Shippuden Kakashi, all the versions of Shippuden Kakashi. And before we get into the fights, I'm going to emphasize the intel part of this video. So I'm going to be giving Kakashi the intel he would have had in the chronological case. So for example, to use Hidan and Kakuzu again, for Hidan, he will have knowledge of Hidan's ritual ability thanks to his intel he got from Shikamaru in the Asuma fight. But conversely, Kakashi will not have intel on Kakuzu or his 5 hearts. Just to make it, again, more fair as we go along. Speaking of Hidan and Kakuzu, that's what we'll start off with. 1v1 against Hidan. I think Kakashi should take this. I mean, Hidan's tough, he's not fodder per se, but if you do have knowledge of his abilities, he's really not that threatening. And the same, mid Shippuden, Kakashi was already fighting him pretty well. Not to mention, Kakashi does have numerous long-range jutsu if he needs to, so I think, plus, Hidan did get caught off guard with the Shadow Clone by Kakashi, and Kakashi only used that Shadow Clone to try to save Choji. If he did the same thing as a way of catching Hidan off guard to cut his head off, I mean, it's a GG there. So moving right along to Kakuzu. Kakuzu is a tricky one because I know that a lot of people probably say that Kakashi pretty much lost to Kakuzu in that fight, which they're not wrong, but something you have to keep in mind is that Kakashi was having to babysit 2 other Chunin in that same fight. So it's not entirely fair to discredit his performance when he had to look after a couple people who weren't really helping at all. That being the case, it's still a really tough fight either way. Now, what I can say is that there were a couple of times that Kakashi could have taken the win. Something that people need to remember is that Kakashi did speed blitz Kakuzu at the beginning of the fight with no trouble whatsoever. Kakuzu even notes that he couldn't even sense Kakashi's approach when he hit them with the Raikiri. In all fairness, that was an assassination strike, and Kakashi is kind of a specialist when it comes to assassinations like that. So if it is just a one-on-one or they are really stinging up on each other, then it that won't go as easily. That still doesn't take away from the fact that he could still do the same thing with the clone that he caught off guard with Hidan. Kakuzu will probably be less likely to get caught off guard by a clone, but it still can happen, and if that is the case, Kakashi still might be fast enough to speed blitz him the exact same way. However, it just depends on how Kakuzu takes the fight. If he has all the hearts out like he did in the main series, then Kakashi still might get overwhelmed. He was doing a pretty good job, all things considered. I'm not even going to take that away from him. He was hiding 1v4 the entire fight and was avoiding pretty much every single attack. And it was only because he was fighting so many opponents at the same time that Kakuzu ended up catching him off guard. And this is where I bring up the point that I brought up earlier, was that Kakashi had a couple of chances to try to take Kakuzu out in this fight. The most prevalent being when he had him on the ground and was about to steal his heart. Right then and there, Kakashi could have kamoi'd Kakuzu. Probably his whole body, if I'm being honest with you. I feel this might just be headcanon, but I feel like the reason he did it is because he knew that Shikamaru had a plan. And so there wasn't really any reason, unless he just really felt like Shikamaru was actually dead, that there really wouldn't be any reason for him to resort to using Kamui if he didn't need to. And I think there's a good case in point in that, because after Shikamaru's plan is completed by using Kakuzu's blood against Hidan, that's when, Kakuzu's 3rd heart is destroyed. And then Kakuzu goes for the giant fire style attack that he was about to unleash on them. And Kakashi later says that that's when he was about to use Kamui. It really just depends on how Kakashi kind of takes the fight, but I do feel like if things go down the same way, I mean, Kakashi could have ended that fight right then and there if he really wanted to. Again, it just depends. I'm really like iffy on this. I'm back and forth. I'm 50-50 on it. I think this fight could go either way because I do think Kakashi's performance is a little bit downplayed at times, but not considerably that I've seen. I just feel like he was doing a pretty good enough job, all things considered, especially since he had to, again, babysit 2 other useless Junin. I'm 50-50 on this, especially since this Kakashi is near Pain Arc Kakashi, and I feel like a lot of people kind of do scale Pain Arc Kakashi around Heavy Sasuke level. You know, maybe not Orochimaru absorbed Heavy Sasuke, but Heavy Sasuke nonetheless. So I don't know. I feel like this Kakashi could perform pretty well, but even that said, I'm still 50-50 on it, with maybe giving a slight edge to Kakuzu being able to overwhelm him, and Kakashi kind of being a little bit more reserved on using Kamui for the most part.
Now, what I will say is that if we take the data books into account, they do state that Kakashi is the least strongest Jonin, meaning stronger than Guy. And I would say that at bare minimum, he either rivals 6th Gate or does slightly surpass 6th Gate Guy. Meaning that with his reaction time, he might actually have the speed necessary to take all of the hearts out. Especially if, again, like I said, if he is able to speed blitz Kakuzu's Earth-style heart first. Because if that's the case, then he doesn't have to worry about Kakuzu's Diamond Morph, or the raw durability, as the community likes to put it. But that is 100% fact, though. If he is able to get the Earth-style mask off the field or out of play, then the fight does become a lot more easier for Kakashi. So I will say that.
Moving on to Konan. Now, here's the thing. If Kakashi fights with Konan, then the only reasonable time I would have felt like Kakashi would fight Konan is the Pain Arc. So I'm going to be using the Pain Arc Kakashi for this. Pain Arc Kakashi, I think, performs pretty well. I've said this multiple times that I think Kakashi is right on par with the Sannin level at the Pain Arc. I mean, if not on that level, like right on the cusp of the Sannin level. And if that is the case, then I think he performs pretty well against Konan, just the same way that Jiraiya did. In fact, I would say that maybe he performed a little bit better against Konan than Jiraiya did. Now, that's not to downplay Jiraiya's performance, but my point is that Konan can fly, right? That's like an advantage of hers. But if she wants to get the kill against someone like Kakashi, then she's going to have to try to get at least a little bit closer than all the way up in the air, because Kakashi is a meticulous and defensive fighter as it is. Like, especially if we're doing this in chronological order, the fight would probably likely take place in the Leaf Village. So if that is the case, Kakashi can use the terrain to his advantage, knowing how, where the buildings are, what buildings to hide in, how to hide in them, whatever. And plus, that's not even mentioning the water wall and the mud wall he's got to defend against all of Konan's attacks. So, I mean, if she wants to get the kill, she's going to have to get in at least a little bit closer, like probably the same distance she was with Jiraiya. And if that is the case, then Kakashi has plenty of long-range jutsu to either defend himself with or use on the offense against Konan. And I hate to be the Kamui god, but I mean, even though Kamui isn't as refined or quick as the War Arc right now, it's still pretty fast. I mean, he caught Pain off guard. He literally had Pain thinking that he hit him with the nail. Even Pain realized it. It's like, oh, he must have used that ocular jutsu to divulge the nail too. And whether or not he can get Konan's entire body it's up in the air. I would have feel like he could be able to, because he does mention that he could have warped away the whole Osteropath's body if he had enough chakra. I'm pretty sure he states something like, with the amount of chakra I have, I can't get his entire body. So depending on how far the fight is, Kakashi can use Kamui to teleport Konan's entire body. Especially since, Kakashi is a defensive fighter as it is already. He's pretty meticulous. I feel like by the time he finds an opening, he'll be able to capitalize on it. So I still think Kakashi still takes this one probably about 6 or 7 out of 10 times. Now, granted, if Konan decides to go toe to toe in a close quarters fight, then she may be able to do the same thing she did against Obito and blow half of his body off. But I mean, if Kakashi is still able to get away with some damage, I mean, let's say for the example that she does the exact same thing she did to Obito, where Obito, Kakashi maybe loses an arm or something, he still can use Kamui. So I mean, I don't know. I'm just stating that. But yeah. So next up, we'll go ahead and cover Pain, since we're already talking about Konan. And I mean, yeah. I mean, if it is Pain or Kakashi versus Pain, I know I'm the stan of Kakashi, and specifically Pain or Kakashi too, because I say all the time that I feel like his performance against the Diva Path was downplayed significantly. I mean, yes, full power 1v6. Obviously, Pain's gonna overwhelm Kakashi. That's not even a contest. But all things considered, I do believe Kakashi can perform pretty well. In my personal opinion, I'd say he takes out 2 of the Paths of Pain. Probably maybe 3 if you really want to highball Kakashi. Because again, he's like right on the cusp of that Sani level. And even Pain, recognized Kakashi as a serious threat. I mean, Pain even said when Pain got Kakashi stuck in the rubble in their fight, Pain still even said, to be absolutely safe, I'm gonna keep my distance. I mean, to me, I feel like that says a lot. But yeah, I mean, there's really not much Kakashi can do. I mean, especially if we're going on this chronological case where he has no knowledge of how Pain's jutsu works aside from the field of vision, then yeah, he's going to be overwhelmed at some point. And even by the time he figures out all the abilities of all 6 Paths of Pain, he'll probably be beaten by the time he even, gets a plan to utilize. So yeah, Pain wins like 9 to 10 out of 10 times. Moving on to Sasori. We're going to go rewind a little bit, going on to Sasori. Now, Sasori is actually a tricky one in this fight. Now, I'm not going to play devil's advocate and be like, well, because Granny Chiyo and Sakura won, Kakashi should be able to win too. Which, I mean, it's 2025, y'all. Like, obviously, Sasori wasn't actually, quote unquote, beaten by Sakura and Chiyo. They performed exceptionally. I won't take that away from him. But obviously, Sasori let himself get killed. But all things considered, I think Kakashi would perform pretty well. Now, the Haruka Shell is not going to be lasting too much against Kakashi. Even in the beginning of Shippuden, I don't think it's going to matter. If the fight happens the same way, I do think if Sasori pulls out the 3rd Kazekage, Kakashi performs pretty well. Like, unlike Sakura, he does have long-range ninjutsu to both stop attacks or whatever, or cancel out attacks from Sasori, or launch on an offensive against Sasori. But as I said before, Kakashi is by nature a defensive and meticulous fighter. So I feel like he'll stay on the defensive long enough to figure out how Sasori's abilities work. I mean, he'll see that the 3rd Kazekage uses Iron Sand. And honestly, I feel like maybe, with his defense, like the same way he was doing against Kakuzu, maybe like an Earth-style mud wall or a water wall might defend long enough for him to like evade attacks from Sasori. I mean, I'm going to assume that the Iron Sand will probably just yeet right through a mud wall or a water wall, but at least it'll provide Kakashi with, a defense long enough to jump back, the same way he did with Kakuzu's attack. It's really iffy, but honestly, Kakashi's a good actor, and he can do the exact same thing that Sakura did. Like, Sakura had Sasori thinking that she was like down for the count, and she was face down on the ground, and Sasori went ahead and tried to end the fight with Sakura right then and there, and Sakura literally got up in the split second and destroyed the 3rd Kazekage puppet. Kakashi can do the exact same thing and use the Raikiri to destroy the 3rd Kazekage. And before anyone would say he wouldn't like play dead, he played dead against Pain. He literally had Pain fooled. So I don't think it's too out of the realm of possibility for him to do the exact same thing. If he is able to get the 3rd Kazekage puppet off the field, and then Sasori decides to whip out the 100 puppets, that will be a bit of a challenge, especially considering how far the fight is getting into by this point, because beginning of Shippuden Kakashi is not as impressive as Pain Arc or War Arc Kakashi, obviously. So his chakra reserves may not, be as extensive as either of those 2 arcs. What I will say is if Kakashi hasn't expended too much chakra by this point, he can just rely on his taijutsu with the 100 puppets. Now, what I'm about to say might seem like out there. Here's the thing. In the bell test, and I'll have to like go back and reread it and rewatch it, but in the second bell test, whether it was in the anime or in the manga, Naruto used a whole bunch of shadow clones against Kakashi. And Kakashi was doing pretty well with just his taijutsu alone. I know that the difference between Naruto's shadow clones and Sasori's like lethal puppets may be, it may not be a fair comparison, but it's still Kakashi. I mean, with how fast Kakashi naturally is, his Sharingan perception reaction time, and his incredible taijutsu, I feel like he'd be able to avoid the puppets on their own. If he can, I honestly think that's probably where the fight gets to, because all things considered, I'm pretty sure he would exhausted a lot of his chakra by then, and I don't know if he would have enough to deal with Sasori's real body. That being the case, he may still have one Kamui left in the chamber, and if that is the case, I mean, I would assume that, like, because by this point, they would have no knowledge of Kamui. Like, this would be the first time that Kakashi would have used Kamui, so Sasori may not be aware, depending on if Kakashi can figure out that Sasori's heart is in that little thing that's inside his chest. Who knows? Maybe he can Kamui the thing out or Kamui it away. I don't know. I feel like that would probably be like the last ditch plan. I feel like by the entire time, Sasori's abilities would like drive Kakashi crazy, like mentally, but Kakashi is very meticulous. So I'm not trying to give him too much credit that he deserves, but I do think there's a possibility that within all their fighting, Kakashi could pick up on the fact that that's what he needs to destroy, is the heart thing he's got in his chest, and then set up a Kamui to get it off the field. And with it being like a smaller target, who knows? It may not take as much time to. All that said, though, I would probably give this to Sasori. And honestly, I know I wasn't really mentioning the poison, but the intel going in, I probably would give the intel to Kakashi, at least in terms of the poison. That being the case, I know it may not sound fair, but because he has intel on Sasori's poison, I'm going to let him have the antidote as well. So the poison is kind of taken off the field in that way. So, but even that said, I still think that Sasori would probably still win against this Kakashi. Probably 7 or 8 out of 10 times. I don't want to sleep on this Kakashi, but he isn't as impressive as Pain Arc or War Arc. By the time he figures out what he needs to do, it may be too far into the fight where Kakashi's already expended a lot of his chakra to do so.
Some of you might be thinking I'm still giving too much credit to early Shippuden Kakashi, but again, you have to keep in mind that if we compare his stats and say that he's bare minimum rivaling Sixth Gate guy, then he might actually have the speed and reaction time necessary to deal with all 100 puppets and maybe even combat Sasori's real body. But like I said, I think that is where the fight does end, is that unless he's able to get the Kamui off in his heart, then Kakashi might lose because of his chakra limitations. And if I am giving the poison to Sasori in a hypothetical case without the antidote, then obviously Sasori wins.
Next up, Deidera. Now, I know people will already just be like, well, Deidera, like he already lost against Deidera, which that wasn't really even a fight, it was a chase. Like, let's stop the downplay right now. Second thing is that I would probably put Kakashi's intelligence on par with Sasuke. And since that is the case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that Kakashi would likely figure out that all of Deidera's jutsu are Earth style. Now, Sasuke made a point to say to Deidera, like, you really need to keep your hand signs out of the line of sight when facing the Sharingan, because no matter how fast you are, my eyes can read them. If it's the same case here, Kakashi will figure out that all of his attacks are Earth style, and he can just diffuse them with Light style. The problem is, in all fairness, that Kakashi will not have any long-range Light style attacks the way Sasuke did. If this was Pain Arc Kakashi, then I would give him the Lightning Fang to be able to defuse the bombs at a distance. But it's never really shown or told when Kakashi mastered or developed the Lightning Fang jutsu, so I can't say for certain. And that being the case, I can't really give him the Lightning Hound here. So that means that all the long-range explosives that Deidera has, like the C2 dragons, will not be stopped by Kakashi's Lightning style. He'll just have to, stay on the defensive, dodge, or put up Earth-style walls or water walls, which he can do. I mean, I'm not saying he can't do it. When it comes to Kamui, I feel like it'll probably be the exact same thing. Like, I feel like if Deidera is fast enough to take flight, which on that, I will say, since he was able to avoid Sasuke's blitz attempt at point blank, I mean, I'd say he'd be able to get on a bird and take flight the same way with Kakashi. Although, while what I will say for Kakashi's defense is that if, for some reason, if the fight got this far, if Deidera decided to use C4, I honestly still would give it to Kakashi to be able to figure out how to defuse the nanobots inside of him the same way Sasuke did. So I honestly think his best bet in fighting Kakashi would be just C3. If he can't get him with any of the C2 dragons beforehand, which, you know, if I'm giving all the fairness to Kakashi, I do feel like he'd be able to avoid most of those guided missiles, you know, with how fast and precise and with the visual perception of the Sharingan, I feel like Kakashi should be able to dodge them the same way Sasuke did. But C3 though, I don't know. His best bet would have to be used to Kamui on that. That I do think is possible. So with like I said, C4 probably won't be an issue. But if he does drop C3, that might be a problem as, like I said earlier, he can't shoot his lightning fang from a distance to try to disrupt and defuse the C3 bomb with lightning style. So the best way I feel like he'd be able to handle that is with Kamui, which I would say it's fast enough to, like, before it hits the ground, I'm sure Kakashi could probably Kamui it away. The only issue is, since this is early Shippuden Kakashi, one Kamui use might leave him in a condition to be finished off by Deidera. I'm just putting that out there. I don't know if Kakashi would be able to, you know, move as efficiently as he would before the Kamui snipe. So yeah, that might just leave an opening for Deidera to launch another C2 Dragon guided missile or whatever to kill Kakashi. So all things considered, I think Kakashi does perform pretty well, but if Deidera is able to take flight, I think he does have the advantage. And if you guys think I'm giving too much credit to Kakashi, even after all that said, keep in mind, like, he did tell Naruto whenever they first fought, like, Naruto, you're a close quarters fighter. He's a long range fighter. He's your worst nightmare. Like, he's your worst opponent to fight. We need somebody who has a high intellect and who also has long range jutsu in their arsenal. Oh, wait, and that's me. So it is weird. And I know that, like, a lot of people will say that, like, you know, if he can just use long range attacks against Deidera, why wouldn't he have done that in their chase? Which, that's fair, but I mean, the plot kind of demanded that Kakashi needs to show off his new Monkey Sharingan and his new Monkey Sharingan jutsu. Also, while you can say he could have used a fireball or a water dragon or something to, you know, hit Deidera from a distance, that's also true, but you gotta keep in mind, they were trying to rescue Gaara, and Gaara was literally in the bird's mouth. So, on the off chance that Gaara was still alive, I'm sure Kakashi didn't want to risk, like, hurting or maybe even killing Gaara. So, but all things considered, I will say Kakashi does perform pretty well, but if it comes down to, especially if he has to use C4 first before he uses anything else, then Kakashi's body will be a little bit in tatters the same way Sasuke was. Like, Sasuke mentions that it did kind of injure him, having to use the Chidori on himself to defuse the nanobots inside of him. So it might play out the same way. I'm not entirely sure. But if that is the case, you know, Kakashi's going to be in less condition, like even worse condition, if he has to drop C3 and then use Kamui. So I do think Deidera has got it more often than not against this Kakashi specifically.
And up next we have Kisame, and oh boy. I will be honest with you guys, this one was the trickiest of the entire video for me to cover. I really was not sure who I wanted to give this to. So in the question of the timeline of when these two would fight, I'm going to say that the most reasonable time, aside from part 1, obviously, that they would fight would be either the Pain arc or the 5 Kage Summon arc. Probably the latter because they were both in the Land of Iron pretty much at the same time, so we'll just say the 5 Kage Summon arc. And being that that's the case, his chakra reserves may not be helpful in this fight. Like I said earlier though, like, Kakashi is the least strongest Jonin, so pretty much above Guy. Guy in the 6th gate was able to beat a 30% clone of Kisame, who, honestly, when it comes all down to it, the only thing that should be different when it comes to, like, the clones and the real thing is, you know, jutsu power and variation. So Kakashi being the strongest and scaling to 6th gate Guy while using the Raikiri would allow him to beat early Shippuden Kisame. If we go by late Shippuden, it's a bit different because I'm not sure if Kakashi can scale physically to 7th gate, but he should be able to beat him somehow. based on the data book and whatnot. Maybe with Kamui or a lightning clone, like trap or something like that, but it's arguable. The thing is like Kisame is a freaking monster. Obviously, he's going to scale massively above Kakashi in terms of chakra, right? Well, here's the thing. If Kisame decides to use the water dome against Kakashi for whatever reason, Kakashi's going to be in a disadvantage because that's pretty much where Kisame excels at in terms of fighting. But if Kakashi would be likely quick enough to use a lightning style shadow clone, what I could see him doing is just releasing the clone inside the water dome to immobilize Kisame long enough to maybe cut his head off with Raikiri or land a Kamui. On the subject of Kamui, like in the Pain arc, it's probably going to be the panic button, like a last resort, because especially against someone like Kisame, like it would probably be the exact same thing he had against Pain. Like he would probably only use Kamui if he absolutely felt like he needed to. And depending on how far the fight gets, that's probably what's going to have to happen. Like that's probably going to be the battle ender. So I'm not entirely sure, because if it goes down to attrition, then obviously Kisame is going to win. But it just depends on like where Kakashi's at in terms of if he's, fatigued enough, or, if he's too damaged enough to perform Kamui. If he is able to get a Kamui off, then I don't know. I'm not so sure Kisame is going to be able to avoid it altogether, but it just depends. This one was really tricky for me to do, guys. I'll be honest with you. Like, again, this one I'm so back and forth on. And honestly, I think it's 50-50 for the most part. But I think Kisame just edged it out a little bit in terms of overall strength, chakra reserves, and the fact that he's able to heal for the most part, So unless Kakashi is able to cut his head off completely or use Kamui, then he's not going to have much that's going to be able to put Kisame down permanently. So yeah, I'm going to have to give this one to Kisame as well.
Now we come to Itachi. Oh, Itachi. I know Kakashi versus Itachi is one that I have gotten probably the most flack on in any of my versus battle videos. So if we're doing this in chronological order, then the only time I would realistically see them fighting is probably mid or Pain arc Kakashi versus the sick Itachi that fought Sasuke. So in all fairness, I'm going to go with Pain arc Kakashi versus Itachi. As decently as I think Kakashi performs here, I probably would still have to give it to Itachi. I think Kakashi does give him a fight. I know people are still going to give me crap for that too. Kakashi in the Pain arc is actually pretty slept on. Now, the benefit for Kakashi here is that unlike Sasuke, who didn't go in knowing that the Manku Sharingan's abilities deteriorate eyesight, Kakashi did know. Like the second time they encountered each other in Shippuden, Kakashi blatantly told Itachi, yeah, I know your eyes aren't doing so well right now. So the benefit for him is that now that Kakashi is more of a meticulous and defensive fighter, that he might be able to stay on the defensive long enough for Itachi to burn out the rest of his eyesight. Now, even that being the case, Obito does mention that he still could have killed Heavy Sasuke even with him going blind, even with him being sick. He still could have killed Sasuke easily if he wanted to. This will probably be the same case. As impressive as Pain arc Kakashi is, I would be opt to believe he could probably push him to the brink and make Itachi resort to using Susanoo. I will say that, but if it gets to that point, I don't know. I don't think Kakashi can deal with the Susanoo. I know he has Kamui, but in this fight, he only would have 2 shots of it maximum. And being the case, I don't know. I'm not entirely sold that he can I don't know if he can settle the fight with just 2 Kamuis. Especially if the fight had already gotten to the point where he had to use a bunch of jutsu already. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure if he'd be able to beat Itachi with this. I will say that I feel like he does avoid Itachi's genjutsu. Kakashi made it a point to note that I know how to counter your Tsukiyomi this time around. So, I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but I just don't think Tsukiyomi is going to be the battle ender, in my opinion. Amaterasu is likely, but Kakashi also does know that Itachi has it. Now, I think it's funny because both Amaterasu and Kamui both kind of work the same way as far as like how they're performed. Because Amaterasu, in terms of Itachi's use of it, it just spawns wherever Itachi's looking at. Same thing with Kakashi's Kamui. Like wherever he's looking at, it just spawns the portal right there, and whatever he's looking at gets teleported. So if both are quick enough, like I can see both of them like launching the jutsus simultaneously at the same time, and them kind of canceling each other out in a way, if that makes any sense. Like the second Itachi whips out Amaterasu, like Kakashi could already be like using Kamui at the exact same time and have the portal ready to warp away Amaterasu. So I don't know. All things considered, I feel like Itachi still wins this because Kakashi just doesn't have the stamina to like last long enough. Again, especially if he gets down to the Susanoo. Like I will say that I feel like Kakashi could last long enough to push Itachi to get to the Susanoo. But outside of that, he doesn't really have much that can combat it. Unless, again, Kakashi just stays on the defensive long enough for the Susanoo to just disappear. So I would probably give this one to Itachi about 8 out of 10 times as well. Last we have Obito, and I mean, I'm going to go ahead and say this is like mid Shippuden Kakashi, since they actually did kind of fight in mid Shippuden, and that being the case, Kakashi loses. Because without really any intel on how like his abilities work, Kakashi might be taken off the field by the time he does figure it out. So Obito was already a menace in mid Shippuden anyway. So there y'all have it. There's the rest of the video. Let me know if y'all still think I'm gassing Kakashi. I was doing this as a way of like, because I mean, all things considered, and all full disclosure, in my previous War Arc Kakashi versus the Akatsuki, I still stand by everything I said in that video. That's why I did this video, to see like how I feel like Kakashi at each point of the series could deal with each respective Akatsuki member. And I feel like I was a little more fair to the Akatsuki in this one. Even though I still feel like I was fair to the Akatsuki in the previous video. I'm digressing, but the point is, I wanted to do this video because I know I'm known as the Kakashi stan among the community. So I really wanted to just put my opinion out there and say who I feel like would realistically win in each one of these fights. So hope you all enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you have, please make sure you like the video if you haven't already. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Click the bell for more notifications. Planning on a new video out soon. Me and Daigo's 4th episode is going to be dropping soon. So stay tuned for that. Till the next one, Lightning Blade out.